Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is fanfiction. This is the next chapter of Yokai Tamer League. Just as a pre-warning, because I did it in the previous one, I may react to actual scenes that happened in-game, like actual conversations or things that happened. So, yeah, you'll find out. I will, probably react, and I will be like, side note, this happened, yeah. Anyway, so, chapter 3. Yuki sat in his room watching Takoyaki play with Kirei's meow ball. He had asked for them to look after it for a while, since the cat had started to attack and damage furniture by scratching it to pieces. He wanted to cat-proof his room before he brought Meow Ball back. A soft knock at the door drew him out of his thoughts. Takoyaki looked up. In her moment of distraction, Meow Ball took the string she had been dangling in front of him and started to chew on it. Takoyaki sighed and got up to answer the door. "Darius, Ember," she said with a smile before giving a yell of surprise at the twin cuffs on Darius's wrists. "What happened?" She let them in and led them to where Yuki sat watching them. "Nagi went on an impromptu journey," Ember explained softly. "He passed the leadership to Dari." "But I want to pass it to you, Yuki. Ember and I can be your assist, but I don't want to be guild leader," Darius said with a smile. Yuki wordlessly reached out his hands, and Darius took off the cuffs and passed them to him. "The room of the guild leader is yours." Yuki shook his head and smiled. Closing his eyes, he tapped into the magic of the guild and the building, commanding 2 identical rooms to be created. They watched as the room around them shifted, becoming more spacious. Opening his eyes, he smiled before placing the single cuff back on Darius. "He says that because you two are co-leaders, there's no reason why the room of the guild leader and your bedrooms should be different. We don't need 3 rooms on this floor, only 2, Takoyaki said with a slight tilt of her head. "So both rooms now look identical." Darius shook his head, but quietly accepted Yuki's choice. Ember blinked, confused at what just happened. "Did you lose your voice, Snow Bunny?" Takoyaki started laughing while Yuki mock-glared at her before silently laughing as well. "He did something to upset the gods," Takoyaki explained, as she tried to get her breath back. "So they made him mute for a while." "Oh." Ember stared at Yuki, who shrugged his shoulders. "A mute guild leader. Well, even if you didn't want the leadership, you wouldn't have been able to say no." Ember giggled before the others joined in her laughter. Ember skipped ahead of Darius after leaving Yuki and Takoyaki's room. They had some morning tea with the pair, and she was now bouncy with sugar. Darius followed, wondering how to bring up the topic of their disagreement. He followed behind, not really paying attention to where they were heading. He came to an abrupt halt when he ran into her. "You know," Ember said softly, looking out over the hot springs, "I never told you about my previous spouses before." Darius moved to stand next to her. "Sean, you mean?" "No," Ember sighed. "You're my 4th spouse. I don't have much luck when it comes to being married to Tengu." He was silently listening. He didn't want to interrupt her flow. If she was going to open up to him, then he didn't want to let her second guess or hesitate. "Kirei's known me ever since my first spouse, Assassin. He was so charming and sweet. He would always shower me with gifts. but all he wanted was a convenient play toy. Always wanted sex, nothing more. Didn't want to start a family. Whenever I pushed the topic, he would yell at me. Tell me I'm not smart enough to look after a baby. That a baby with me would be just as worthless as me. I felt trapped. I couldn't see a way out. One day, he gave me his ring and said that he was going to find his real spouse overseas. He couldn't handle having to train me anymore because I was a lost cause. Darius wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Tears were streaming down her face. It took her a while to slowly calm down again. My third spouse, Levi, she continued, her voice slightly muffled by his chest. He was just like Assassin, showering me with gifts, and was also sweet and charming. But when something would go wrong, it was my fault. He was never to blame for any issues that happened. It was always me. It got to the stage that he started betraying me, lying about what I was like, lying about everything. I forced a divorce with him. Kirei kept him away from me. He would follow me and stalk me, steal things I'd find, and try to ruin my reputation with people I met. After Kirei nearly sent him to Takamagahara, he vanished. Kirei and I have been worried that he might come back to try again. She sighed softly. Kirei is more worried now that he has Choco at his side. He's worried Levi might come back to... He's worried Levi might attack her to get back at him. She took a deep breath to steady herself. Only you and Sean have been the only spouses I've had that haven't tried to harm me. She rested her head against his chest again. I only divorced Sean because his first spouse came back. I thought it was only right for them to be together because Sean had already had a daughter with her. Her ears twitched nervously before she added, When you spoke to me, I felt like I was talking to Levi, being blamed for choosing the wrong thing, not being up to his standards. I became afraid of you attacking me. I wouldn't harm you, Emb, Darius finally replied softly. He finally understood why Kirei and her were so close. He also finally understood just how fragile she was to words and how they were spoken. I'm blunt and to the point. I don't mince words, I never have. But I'm not attacking you or blaming you for anything. We've actually had that conversation. Side note. In the game, Daria and I actually did have that conversation. Like, not that conversation, but the whole... His words upset me, and he told me that he's blunt and to the point. So I added that in, because it is part of his character. Meanwhile, Yuki stood looking at the bookcase. He had an idea, but needed to implement it. I could use Choco to test it out. He looked at the series of books on kitsune skills and battle techniques that Takoyaki owned. Tako? He called in his mind. As he turned, he called again. Tako? Sighing, he gave a gentle smile. Takoyaki sat dozed on the couch behind him, her tails curled up around her like a blanket. He walked over to the bed and picked up a light cotton blanket and placed it over her, tucking the top in around her shoulders. He turned back to the bookcase and brought down the first book of the series and sat down on the other couch, looking at the layout of the material. How long will she sleep for? He asked. A small voice let him know, about an hour or two. Nodding, he took out his phone and flicked to Chocolate's name. "Meet me in my room in about 2 hours. I have something that might help you." Carefully, he continued to flick through the book. This idea on how to help Chocolate and other kitsune like Chocolate get stronger. If this worked, he planned to transfer the idea to help strengthen the weaker tengu in the guild as well. He had a feeling this preparation will be needed in their near future. I just hope my feeling is wrong. Chocolate looked at her phone curiously as she made her way to Yuki and Takoyaki's room. I wonder what this is about. She hadn't told Kirei where she was going to meet Yuki, but she figured that because he was a guild member, that there wouldn't be an issue. Raising her hand, she knocked on the door. "Choco, come in," Takoyaki said, inviting her inside. Yuki was thinking that we need to get the guild stronger. She guided Chocolate to the lounge and invited her to take a seat. The problem being, a tengu teaching a kitsune techniques is difficult. So, he wanted you to work through my book series I got from my parents. I was hoping that once you're done, you could assist him with developing a more streamlined, concise way to teach new techniques and skills to the guild kitsune. Yuki handed her the first book in the series with a smile. Chocolate looked at him confused before starting to giggle. "You got yourself muted again!" Takoyaki and Yuki also joined her in her giggling and nodded with a big smile on his face. "You also..." Chocolate's face fell. "You have Nagi's cuffs." Takoyaki sighed and briefly explained to Chocolate what had happened earlier that day. She could see Chocolate was upset to hear the news of Nagito's leaving without saying a word to anyone. "Yuki says we'll do the books in fortnightly intervals. Work through the books. Learn what you can. Ask questions to any kitsune about things you don't understand." Chocolate's expression changed again to excitement. "I can't wait! I need to be stronger to catch up to all of you." Takoyaki placed a hand on her shoulder. "There's no rush, Choco. Take your time. Better to be slow and steady than rush and be weakened because of it." Chocolate mock saluted the two. "Yes, sir!" Settling down for the night, a certain tengu had a particularly evil plan in mind. He waited until his kitsune stopped moving and snuggled up to his side like she usually did when they went to sleep before he started talking. "Ember?" Darius kept his voice controlled and sounded concerned. She didn't look up at him. Her head rested on his chest, eyes closed, and was listening to his heartbeat. "Did you forget something?" A sneaky smile played on his face. "I don't think I did." She sounded mildly uncertain. "No, I don't think I forgot anything. Why do you ask if I did?" Darius wrapped his arms around her and shifted his body until he was laying on his side facing her. Her eyes snapped open and found herself laying on one of his arms instead of his chest. Once he stopped moving, she looked up at him. "Are you sure?" She could see the sneaky smile on his face. Her ears pricked up to sharp points. He knew something she didn't. "I'm sure," she replied, wondering where he was going with this line of questioning. "I assure you, Ember." He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. "You've forgotten." His hand trailed down her back and rested just above the base of her tail, eliciting a squeak from her. "And I'm going to remind you so you don't ever forget." again. And that's it. I'm a bad girl. I have to admit though that in the game, Daddy really was like, he was very unpredictable. He was quite hard to read at times. But yeah. So trying to write him as a character was quite challenging. I had to pull a lot of stuff from the game. Anyway, as always, make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know what I should be writing as fan fiction after this, because I haven't started writing any fan fiction. I've been working on Magic of Moonlight, which is one of my original pieces, but I haven't written any fan fiction, so I don't know what to write. I don't know if I should continue one of the Yu-Gi-Oh ones, or if I should write something else. I am tempted to write maybe like a Diablo 2, Diablo 3 type story, but then again, I don't know if I really want to, because that's very lore heavy. And Magic of Moonlight is very lore heavy, so having two pieces that I'm writing that are lore heavy is just, because I'll confuse the two. Yeah. Give me ideas! Anyway, as always, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.